A little bit about me. You've probably picked up from the accent. I am from Australia. I love all things ALM and DLM, application lifecycle management, database lifecycle management. I'm a regular attendee at tech events all over the world because, you know, I love to travel. Half the time I'm not even home. And I love talking about all things Microsoft and all things data. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, and you can also jump on my blog, which is heavily out of date, but it is there and it has a contact me. All right, today we're going to talk about an overview of the Fabric Tenant Admin Settings. We're going to look at the APIs for extracting those settings. I'm going to talk to you a bit about notifications, or the fact that there isn't an inbuilt notification system, and then we'll do a little quick demo, time permitting. The first thing to be aware of is where are the Fabric Tenant Admin Settings. So if you've never been to the admin settings, you want to go to the little gear icon on the top right, and then from that, go click all the way down under Governance and Insights, you'll see the Admin Portal. Now, this is the same whether you go to app.powerbi.com or whether you go app.fabric.microsoft.com, same thing. The difference for those two is the selector on the bottom right. One's prefixed to Fabric, one's prefixed to Power BI, but they're the same. Then this is what the admin settings will look like. Now, if you only see the capacity settings, what that means is you're not a Fabric administrator, i.e. you don't exist in the Fabric administrator Entra role. So Fabric admins are defined in Microsoft Aventure, formerly Azure Active Directory. So you see that Fabric admin role, that's how you set up who can see the tenant settings. Capacity settings, because they're available for capacity admins, that's where you will see those. If you've spun up a trial within Fabric, you'll see capacity settings because that's a trial capacity. Within those settings, we have a lot being 135 at the moment, and that is always changing. So when I first did this slide, I want to say about 8 months ago, the only difference between then and now in terms of sections was one of the sections disappeared and a new one appeared in its place. But the actual tenant settings has always been over 100 since they introduced Fabric, and there's always more being added. The common ones that are added are if a preview feature is released to Microsoft Fabric, often that is put in as a tenant setting as to whether you can turn it off or on when it is an item type. So things like Fabric SQL database, because they're an item, it has a tenant setting to turn it off. An interesting one that you might want to be aware of as a tenant setting is the ability for Microsoft to display marketing messages on your tenant, i.e. that might be something like FabCon Europe is coming up. They will display a banner on your tenant. That's actually a tenant setting to be able to turn on or off the ability for marketing messages like that to appear. I say that because I've worked with customers that didn't want to see any marketing messages, and about a week later that tenant setting appeared and we had to turn it off. The other ones that you might want to be familiar with is the Copilot and Azure OpenAI service. So anytime you're working with Copilot within Fabric, there are two tenant settings that allow you to restrict who can access things like Copilot. And some of the settings are all or nothing. You turn them on and they're enabled for everyone, or you turn them off and they're disabled for everyone. Now, if you are using a feature and you turn it off, like a data flow, then make sure that you're aware of the impact. So when you turn a setting off and it's in use, it will cause those features to error. That's happened for a few people. The other thing is when you turn them on, you have the ability to turn them on and restrict them to either a security group or by exception. So everyone except a security group. So it can be handy if you want to pilot some of these features, you can turn them on just for a separate group of people. But what else can we do within those tenant admin settings? Given that we've got 135 and over 30 sections to go through, it's important to know that you can search through the tenant settings. So you don't have to know exactly where in the list you're looking. You can use the search on the right of screen. Don't use the one at the top of the screen because that's looking at searching your tenant. You want to be just searching the admin settings. So within the tenant settings, that search filter up the top on the right-hand side within the same sort of pane interface. But we want to be able to extract out those settings. Why? Because there's 135 of them, but B, because you're the only one, the tenant admin, you're the only one that can see them. So sometimes you want to be able to extract out those settings, put them into, say, a lake house or any sort of storage point, put a Power BI report off the front and make it available to your entire org. And that way you can communicate to your users what settings are on or off, should you want to. Sometimes a lot of orgs don't want to make this information available, but I find it handy to make available. So if someone says, I want to use this feature, they can see, yes, I need to be in this security group, let me log a request, or no, it's not enabled, let me talk to the Fabric admins about what governance controls there are. This particular blog has links in it, but they will error with a 404. So where you actually want to go is over to the Fabric REST APIs and look at the list tenant settings. That's how we can extract out the list. So you can hit it as a REST API, but I'm going to show you how to do it in other ways. On that REST API documentation, if you've never seen it before, we have the option to try it. So we can go into the browser, go to the list tenant settings, scroll down to the interface section, hit try it now. It'll ask us to log in with our Entra credentials that have tenant administration access, and then we can hit that API endpoint and get the results as a subset in the browser to see what those results look like. There are a number of people in the community. This one's published by some of the Microsoft staff, where you can leverage pre-built reports. So you don't have to build your own if you don't have the time or if you're not inclined to be a report builder. Notifications. The sad part, there are no out-of-the-box notifications. So you can't just subscribe and get an email or an SMS when new tenant settings appear, which is unfortunate. You do get a little bit of a hint to let you know when new settings appear, but it relies on you navigating to that tenant admin settings quite often. And the other way to keep up to date is check out the Microsoft Fabric blogs. But given those monthly blogs include every single Fabric feature that's getting placed inside the service and also Power BI Desktop, you can get quite an exhaustive blog to read through. So it's kind of easier if we had a solution that extracts those tenant settings, look to store them. The good part about storing them is then you can do a comparison and then you can have a notification built off that sort of report. That way you see what your latest is. So in terms of that new or updated tenant settings, so when you go into the tenant settings, right up the top, there'll be a section for the new and updated. So you can see here a list of the current ones. I believe this is as at yesterday. So you can see we've got some new APIs that are available. We've got differences with Fabric data in M365, etc., etc. So that changes over time as they introduce new features. They appear in that section, but they also appear in the corresponding section header. So they'll appear in both. How do we extract the information in a more automated fashion? We're lucky enough to have a Python SDK available. So if you are using Fabric features, you can, of course, leverage Python with the notebooks capability. And so we can simply install that particular package, and then we're able to get the tenant settings out as long as we're using an account that has the correct privileges to do so. So this is an example of how we can do it, and I will show you that with an actual notebook. So if we see here, and hopefully this is large enough for everyone, but let's just bump it up a bit more. So courtesy of Copilot, because we love using productivity improvement tools when we can. So first we need to install the actual Python library we want to use. And then in this section, I've actually hidden it, but in this one, I actually put in my tenant credentials, so the client ID and secret. I'll scroll past quickly because it's got a secret. It's all right, I'll change it later. And then we import the actual one we want to use. And now we can simply call a function to get the tenant settings out. And then because we're working in Python, I'm going to shift it to a data frame, and then you can display that data frame. So you can see straight away the ability for us to pull back not only the setting name itself, so you'll have two different labels. You'll get like a name and a display name, so to speak. So you've got to look for the display name if you're trying to correlate it to what you see on the user interface. It'll tell you whether it's enabled or disabled. It'll tell you whether you can specify a particular security group, and it'll also let you see additional information appropriate to that tenant setting, i.e. the security group that has been restricted to it. And we can do other things like we can sort this and put it in other ways. Whoop. So in summary, that was just a quick sub 10-minute overview of the Fabric Tenant Admin Settings, the ability to extract them with an API, and the fact that we don't have notifications, but some hints on how you can achieve notifications in other ways. You can even use something like Power Automate to connect to it. And I want to thank you all for attending this session, and I will see some of you or new people in probably another hour when I talk to you about sensitivity labels. But if you've got any questions, feel free to ask, but otherwise I will give you your time back to attend the next session.